Hello. Welcome to the Board of Education's December 5th, 2024 regular session meeting. Please stand as we observe a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Pike. Face the flag. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a few announcements before we begin. Ms. Elkins will not be in attendance tonight due to her participation in a choir event at Halls High School, so we wish her the best in her choir concert this evening. And board members, just a reminder that each of us needs to complete our annual charter authorizer training. You received an email from Ms. Coatney with the information to the training module a couple weeks ago. So if you have not completed that yet, please do so as soon as possible. And as you know, the timeline for our annual superintendent evaluation process has started, since the evaluation is to be completed in January of each year. You did receive a copy of this year's schedule by email. So I just wanted to remind you that our individual evaluations are due by Monday, December 16th, and they should be submitted by email to Dr. Reiswick and myself, and then also copy Ms. Coatney on that as well. If you need any assistance with your evaluation tool or printing that out, Ms. Coatney is on standby to assist at your convenience, so thank you, Ms. Coatney, for offering to do that. And on behalf of the board, I just want to wish all of our families, students, staff, and community a wonderful, well-deserved winter break as Knox County Schools closes, starting with a half day on Friday, December 20th, and students returning for the spring semester on Monday, January 6th, which also happens to be the date of our January work session, so it's going to be a busy day for some of us that have kids in school. Are there any requested changes to the agenda?
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Triplett, a second by Ms. Christie. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to our agenda. I know it's a little different tonight. We do have a presentation from Milan, Chicago. So welcome, guys. And this is on our stakeholder engagement survey findings for the public.
So thank you all. We very much appreciate the opportunity to share the results with you tonight. I know you have the slide deck, you also have the primary report, and then you have an appendix which has all of the analyses in it. So settle in, because we'll be here till well past midnight.
It's a pretty big packet.
It is a very big packet. So we're going to try to hit the highlights in our presentation here and kind of give you a sense of what we're seeing overall. But there's a lot of information in the results that we certainly hope you can find valuable as you undertake and really get into the strategic planning effort. Before I say any more, I do want to just comment that Jennifer and I, we work with a lot of municipalities, organizations, institutions around writing surveys for them and then doing analyses. I just say we very much enjoyed working with your community and with you all. The people that we met with, the folks that shared their ideas and perspectives and thoughts, very genuine, very honest, and again, I think there's a lot of good data in what's here, and we really do hope that it helps you as you move forward. So, just to give you a little bit of a sense of what I want to do tonight in terms of kind of walking you through what we see. The project really was, to give you information that you can use moving forward. And in particular, to focus on information from three key stakeholder groups: parents, families, folks that have students in a KCS school, KCS staff, and then just general members of the Knox County community. So those three groups were sort of separated out in terms of identifying key questions and topics that we'd want to sort of solicit from folks across those three groups. And so there's obviously some common elements, right? There's things that would be common across the three groups, but then there's some unique pieces as well. And so what I want to walk you through here is I'm going to talk first about those aspects of the surveys that were consistent across all three stakeholder groups, so we can kind of lay them side by side and say, how do those groups see things when they're looking at through the same lens? Then we're going to walk through each of the three separate surveys and highlight the key findings with respect to the family survey, the staff survey, and the community survey. And then I'm going to wrap up with some of the results associated with the focus groups then that were done on the heels of the surveys to try to sort of better understand some of the results from the surveys themselves. So overall, I'm going to, or sort of big picture, I'm going to give you those items that were in common first, so we can take a look at those. And then I'm going to go through survey by survey, and then we'll get to the focus groups as well. So just in terms of procedure, so the data collection itself occurred, the survey data collection, I'm going to start with that, occurred between September 25th and October 18th. You can see here that across the three surveys, we had about 7,000 folks respond to the family survey, 2,600 respondents to the staff survey, and 260 responded to the community survey. Now, we do have folks that may have started a survey and for whatever reason didn't consent, didn't want their data used, so those folks are excluded. And obviously some folks didn't choose to answer all the questions. So the reason I say that is for any given analysis, any given item that we're looking at, those numbers may not be exactly the same throughout because people kind of drop in and drop out of the survey. The other thing, just to sort of lay the foundation here, so many of the survey questions had 5-point response scales. Right, ranging from things like strongly agree to strongly disagree. So to try to sort of keep this at a relatively basic kind of fundamental kind of level, we create a favorability score, which is just the percentage of folks who respond strongly agree and agree. Right, so you're kind of seeing, okay, these are the folks, this is the percentage of folks that are on the positive side of responding to this item. So as I go forward here and you're seeing some of these numbers, that's what those numbers are reflections of. Now, not all of the items were on 5-point scales. There were some items that were responded to on 4-point scales. I'll call those out as I'm going along, but just to kind of give you an overall view of what the results are going to look like. So one of the common elements across all three surveys were questions around your current strategic priorities, 4 strategic priorities. And in particular, folks were asked, how well is KCS performing with respect to each of those priorities, and how important are each of those priorities? And the response scales here for how well, very good to very poor, and for importance, very important to very unimportant. So again, if we think about the favorability scores for the how well, it's going to be the percentage of folks who said very good and good, so the 5s and 4s, and for importance, the very important and important, so the 5s and 4s. So here we see for the excellence in foundational skills priority, and I'll just preface this right now, if you haven't had a chance to look through any of the report yet or anything, for the 4 priorities, this slide will not look like it changes very much. It's going to be consistent as we go forward. So performance on the left side, importance on the right side. What you can see here is that on the importance element, more than 90% of folks across all 3 surveys said, yep, that's an important priority for KCS, right? The community is 98%. The lowest is the parent family survey with 92%. So folks see this as an important priority very clearly. On the performance side, right, 59% of respondents on the parent survey said, yep, KCS is doing well. If you remember that, those anchors, 58% of staff, slightly less than 50% of community, right? So when we look at this through our lens, what we would see is that folks say, yep, this is an important priority, but KCS has some work to do in terms of achieving the goals associated with that priority. The second priority is great educators in every school. Again, you can see all those importance ratings lining up above 90%. Okay? The performance ratings ranging between 48 at the low end for community up to 68% for staff. Okay? So again, same kind of thing. Important priorities, performance, there's some opportunities there to improve. The third priority was career empowerment and preparation. Importance rating still very high, not above 90 this time, but two of them very close, all three of them really very close in the high 80s. And then on the performance, again, hovering around 50, community at the low end of 49, staff at the slightly higher at 55. And then the last of the 4 priorities, success for every student. Again, on the important side, 90% plus of respondents saying, yep, this is an important priority. Performance, this would be the lowest one across the 4 for parents, staff, and community. And so again, when we look at this, and I know we're not engaged with you all in actually driving the strategic plan, developing the strategic plan going forward, but just when we look at these numbers and in other contexts, what we would see is, hey, we're on the right track in terms of the North Star we're pointing towards seems to be the right one, but we have some work to do to get there. Or at least there's and this is the point that I want to make sure is clear. This is the perception, right? The perception is we have some work to do to get here. Now, the good news is for you all, you probably have some objective data, not probably, I know you do. You have objective data about how you're doing with respect to these 4 priorities. So it gives you a lens to say, how are we doing objectively, and do these perceptions line up with that objective reality, right? So what we'd be concerned with in another context might be, if an institution or an organization is doing incredibly well, but the perception is they're not, okay, we got a communication problem somewhere. That information is not getting out. But if the perception is we could do better, and the objective data tell us we could do better, that sort of falls into lockstep. So we don't presume to know what your objective data are telling you, but just to sort of think about that as you're piecing this together. This is the perception of how you're doing that you might want to couple with the objective data. So those are the 4 primary priority, or your 4 current priority areas. The other piece that was in common across the 3 surveys were questions related to how well KCS is preparing students for life after graduation with respect to the 5 characteristics in your portrait of a graduate, right? So the response scale here is a little bit different. It's a 4-point scale, great preparation to no preparation, but then there was an option here for no opinion. Okay? So the scale is a little bit different here. These are now 4s and 3s that are being combined. And so how well does KCS prepare students for life after graduation? We can see here that in general, right, where the highest ratings are coming from staff, 50 to 60%, parents down in the low 30s up to 40, community members slightly higher than that, right? So parents have the least favorable perceptions of how well KCS is doing with respect to these 5 characteristics. Staff has the most favorable impressions. But again, there's not a lot of difference across the 5 characteristics. Okay, so those are the items that would be consistent across all of the surveys, right? So folks who took any of those surveys saw those kinds of questions. So I'll now do is turn our attention, talk some of the specifics about the family survey, and you can tell me if you want me to go faster, slower, whatever you want me to do. Okay. So in terms of respondent characteristics, and I do want to pause here and just say something. So for the surveys, we did ask people some basic demographic kinds of questions. But what we also told folks is we're not using those questions to sort the items, basically. We're not going to use that information in that way. All we want to know is what's the representation in terms of the survey respondents to your overall population. Right? So the only difference to that is when folks identified where their children went, were they preschool, elementary, middle, or high, those are used to break down, but individual identity questions are not. You can see that almost 2/3 of the respondents had students in preschool or elementary school, and about 1/3 of respondents in each of the middle and highs. Okay? So that gives you just a flavor for who the respondents were. So now, for the individual survey items, these are the favorability scores for each of the items. And, right, so you can see here that, right, between 2/3 and 3/4 of folks see these items as favorable, preparing students to be skilled readers, successful in the next grade, math skills. I won't read each of those individually. But what I will call to your attention to is on the right side where you see that elementary and then an arrow up. that just indicates that that grade band had significantly higher favorability scores than the other grade bands. Okay, so on this slide here, for example, question 1, question 3, and question 4 have nothing, so there are no differences across the grade bands. For the other two preschool and elementary school respondents had more favorable responses to these items. Some specific items related to great educators in every school. Highly effective educators in every classroom and invest in its educators. Neither of these hit 50% favorability, but in both cases, those folks that had children in elementary school had higher favorability than those in middle and high. Right? So again, just to orient you, these are now specific questions related to each of your 4 priorities. These are not those overall questions, so only the families were seeing these questions. Questions in the sort of area of career empowerment and preparation. There were a few questions related to the 865 academies, right? Less than 50%, or just slightly more than 40% actually have said they heard about the 865 academies. A quarter of the folks had favorable responses to preparing students for life after graduation, but 92% do agree that it's important that students are supported in the way that the 865 academies support them. Right? So again, this might be a question of communication and getting some of this information out. What you see on the right side is there were several programs that were identified. There were actually 8 programs that were identified and opportunities. And the question is, if you were to rank order these in terms of importance and what KCS should be devoting energies towards, these are the rank orders. So the highest, the most highly ranked, be to invest resources in STEM, then industry experiences, early post-secondary opportunities, humanities came in 4th, and then advanced academics came in 5th. And I will say, just sort of as an aside, I know the numbers aren't here, but STEM is twice as important in terms of the rankings as the second one. It was by far the most highly ranked. Some of the specific questions in the success for every student section, and by and large, these are on the higher side compared to what we saw on some of the prior slides. 3/4 of folks endorse that or have favorable reaction to that KCS clearly communicates behavioral expectations to students, down to 55% providing extra support when children struggle. But you can see here that for every one of these items, folks with preschool that were responding to preschool and elementary had higher favorabilities than either middle or high. Some questions now moving away from, so a lot of many of the questions did sort of orient to your 4 current strategic priorities, but then there were some other areas on the survey that moved away from those priorities. So for one of those areas was just sort of generally, we call it the student family experience. All right, so the top one there you see KCS offers opportunities to participate in activities. See 3/4 of folks had favorable reactions to that. This is one of the unusual cases where respondents with middle and high school students had more favorable responses than elementary, but you can see for all the other ones, we go back to that pattern of elementary students having higher favorability scores in terms of providing environments that are respectful and welcoming, maintaining safe and secure campuses, families feeling welcome and included, and students feeling valued and important. But in all cases, more than 2/3 of folks endorsed those items or had favorable responses to those items. Another topic area is communication. And you can see quite a bit of variability here in terms of the responses. 88% had favorable responses to the KCS keeps me informed. And elementary students, or parents with elementary students, higher than the others. And you can see that was true for all of them here. Down to the low end, about 1/3 of folks favorable responses to the question, KCS offers translation interpretation assistance to parents or guardians who need it, right? So you can see a pretty wide range in there. There's some 79 and higher, a bunch there in the mid-range, and then that one that's sort of on the lower side. The only one that's a little bit unusual there is towards the bottom. KCS provides me with information and ideas on how to help my children at home, both elementary and middle school. They were not different from each other, but they were both higher than high school. This just sort of summarizes those top 5, bottom 5. So the most favorable items that we saw in the family surveys, highest was at 93%. The lowest of those top 5, 79%. So, we often do, and I'm not just saying this because of the group that we're presenting this to and that we're talking to, but we often think about this as a grading scale when we present this to organizations. If you're above 90, that's usually a really good sign that things are going well. That's like an A. If you're above 80, that's like a B, C, D, and you can kind of go down from there. And so when we get down to those lowest ones, you can see there are a few that definitely have some areas of opportunities, right? So this is in terms of favorability. So at the lowest end, only 26% had favorable responses to the 865 academies are preparing students for life after graduation. But keep in mind there too that a lot of folks said they didn't know about those academies. So again, it's important to take that all into context. So these now, for those of you that remember the survey or that you may have taken the survey, there was a final sort of catch-all question that gave folks a chance to say, hey, anything that you want to talk about that wasn't incorporated in here somewhere. This is a very simplified summary of those open-ended responses. You can see that slightly more than a third of the folks had suggestions around curriculum. And another third around improving the student experience. About a quarter of folks made comments related to communication, ways to improve communication. 15% had comments around KCS staff, and another 12% commented on things that we would sort of bucket as infrastructure. Now, in the report, you'll see those get broken down into sort of sub-themes, and actually when you have the raw data will be yours, you can see the individual comments themselves. But just to give you some flavor for what were people seeing, or what were people saying sort of unsolicited. Okay, so that's sort of the overview of the family. In terms of the staff survey, again, by way of just sort of giving you some feel for respondents, we had respondents across the regions. The two that might be a little bit unusual there, we have region 1 through 5, then we have pre-K, and then there was district-wide. So district-wide was a catch-all for people that weren't solidly in one of the regions. So that's just a snapshot of who responded to the staff survey. In terms of the roles that people had, you can see that a little more than 2/3 of the folks were in the group of teacher, counselor, social worker, or instructional coach. And down there, 12% for instructional support, 4% school or district, 6% administrator, and then 9% again district-wide, picking up folks that don't fall cleanly into one of those. So when we look at student expectations, you can see here that about 80% of staff agreed that KCS sets high expectations, academic expectations for students, down to 50% for high behavioral expectations. So there's definitely some differences there between the two. And I should have pointed out, too, that in all cases for families, we had a margin of error of 1%. For students, or for staff, I think it was 2%, and for the community, because we had fewer, we're up around 5% and 6%. So just to give you a flavor, that's in the report, but I realized I didn't say that at the beginning. Overall experiences with KCS as staff members. So there's a couple questions related to communication, a couple questions related to professionalism. Overall, pretty positive reactions, pretty favorable responses to being kept informed, that my principal and supervisor communicates effectively, and pretty high responses too on the professionalism questions, treated professionally by both coworkers and principals/supervisors. Infrastructure and resources, slightly lower favorability ratings. Safe and security, about 80% favorable, down to 58% for a school being clean and well maintained. And then in terms of resources, then 60 to 70% having access to high quality materials and having the resources necessary to do my job. Training and professional development, it's again sort of ticking down just a little bit, between 50, hovering around 50% up to 60. The low end having opportunities to advance, less than 50% endorsed that or had favorable responses to that. 50% offers meaningful professional development opportunities. So again, we would see that as a potential area of opportunity in general, training and development. And in terms of doing my job, a lot of variability here, right? So people definitely feel trusted to complete their work as needed, so 83%, down to 32% saying they have the time needed to complete their tasks during contract hours, so about a third, right? So a lot of variability in those. I would say the one question that always draws my attention in this kind of set is that third one down in doing my job. I feel valued, right? Those are often indicators that you want to, if you can benchmark that and sort of track that over time and see how that's moving, that's often a good indicator of are you on the right trajectory or not. And just like with the families, staff were given the opportunity, hey, anything that you want to talk about that wasn't incorporated in the closed-ended responses to the survey, 61% of the comments were related just broadly around staff experiences they have, 32% around accessibility, and 32% related to student experience. Notice that those do sum to more than 100%. That's because people could say more than one thing. So the same person could have more than one code. And again, in the report, that's broken down by sub-themes and specific examples. Again, highest and lowest in terms of favorability. Treated professionally comes up at the top there. Trusted to complete work and being kept informed coming up at the top. The areas of opportunity, the less favorable responses. Again, the lowest one there was time needed to complete necessary tasks, opportunities to advance, feeling valued, and then the last one there was setting high behavioral expectations for students. Okay. And so that's sort of the high-level view of staff. For the community survey, again, I would just caution we have 260 responses in here, so it's not nearly as large as either of the other two, so just bear that in mind. You see here that 3/4 of folks had favorable.
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question real
I'm
fast?
sorry, yeah, of course.
No, could you kind of explain to us what encompasses the community?
So the community was designed, anybody who, it was anybody in Knox County.
Okay.
Right, so it could be folks that employed or worked with folks that were graduates of KCS. They could be nonprofits that work with KCS.
Okay.
Could just be somebody who comes to the KCS website and says, hey, I may have had a child here at some point, maybe I don't. It really was anybody who wasn't really in one of those other two specific buckets.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted a snapshot of who that involves.
Yes,
awesome.
yes.
Thank you.
And I do think in the report that might be broken down a little bit to show you where they're coming from. About 3/4 of the folks would agree, the community members agree that KCS provides students with opportunities to explore colleges and careers before graduation, prepares students to be skilled readers. Again, these are questions that are designed to sort of be analogs to what we see in some of the other ones. Again, coming from the community, we don't know what someone's specific experience and how would you know that, right? So this is definitely putting different people together, but it was just an attempt to capture that constituent group. I think the least favorable items here from the community, at least, invest in educators at 44% and effectively prepare students for life after graduation less than 50%, right? So again, from our perspective, the areas of greatest opportunity, once we drop below 60% or so, that's where we would really start to look at and go, hey, can we move the needle here? Or are these places where we want to devote some energy, some resource, some attention? We did ask some questions about being involved with KCS and engaging with KCS in some way. And so we see here that, about 4 in 5, so 78% know how to find information about KCS. About 2/3 say they know how they could get involved. 61% say they feel welcome on KCS campuses. And then again, we drop down to 49% is that lowest score, KCS engaging with the community. On the specific engagement side, there was a question, are you currently involved in supporting a school? Are you or the organization with which you work currently involved in supporting a school? Right. 66% are currently involved, and you can see the way that they say they're involved. School support organization, provide resource support, after-school programming, school day volunteers, and tutoring students. Then they were also asked, would you like to become involved or do some additional, be involved in different ways? So again, you can see the percentages as they break down there. So folks do seem like they want to be involved. From the organization as a whole, for folks that said they were part of an organization that works with KCS, they weren't responding necessarily as themselves at this point. They were saying they represent an organization or work for an organization, right? Only about a third said they do, right? That they work for an organization that is currently involved or would like to be involved. About a third said in the past year, our organization has hired KCS graduates. And so we also asked that, or they were also asked, in terms of how you think you could engage with KCS around the current 4 priorities, where do you do it? And where would you like to do it, or where do you think you can do it? And you can see there that where the highest percentages there on the career empowerment and preparation, on the current, but the future by far almost 3/4, success for every student. So there's potentially an opportunity there to engage folks on that 4th priority area. Okay, so the surveys were administered, we collected the data, and more often than not, these raise questions, right? Okay, what did people mean by this? And so what we did was we ran a series of focus groups, some in person, some virtual, to try to get a little bit more flavor, to flesh out maybe some of this a little bit more. So this data was collected between November 6th and November 14th. Again, some of it was in person, some of it was done virtually. There were 6 family groups, 3 staff groups, and 1 community group. Again, trying to see, is there additional information that didn't come out in the surveys that we want to make sure is covered? Now, from our perspective, given the just sheer amount of information we got from the surveys, we didn't expect that the focus groups would reveal things that we hadn't heard about. But again, it's important to give that as an opportunity to at least see, is there anything else out there? And I realize these are small, but there's a lot that came out, so we kind of wanted to see this. From the parent focus groups, right? And these were organized around family, staff, and community, right? So in the family groups, these are the things that we see kind of coming out here, right? That folks saw a need for increased play and recess, decreased frequency of an assessment, limiting use of technology in schools, ensure the curriculum's engaging. I realize there's a typo. That second one down should be great educators. Increase the number of personnel. A lot of families said you need more support staff. There were questions about the organization. Was the organization hierarchy too top-heavy? Focus on retaining and attracting high-quality educators, increased pay, and giving educators more autonomy. Again, these are all things that came out of those parent groups. The career empowerment and preparation, really a lot of the primary topic that came out of that were some questions around these 865 academies. Again, some of it was we don't really know what they are. Some of them were we don't really understand. We know what they are, but we don't really understand how they work. The success for every student, I think one of the common themes that came out most frequently were questions around how to address disruptions in the classroom. And then on the student family experience side, are there opportunities for creating more chances for parents to become involved? That maybe there's opportunities for thinking about parent work schedules as school calendars are created. Again, infrastructure came up. And one of the things that did come out to us that definitely came out several times was the growth in your community, just the influx of people into the community, both now and into the future, and what is that going to mean for the schools as you go forward? Again, my guess is that's not anything you don't know, but it was something that most definitely came out of these meetings. The other things that came out of the parent groups around communication, Some concerns about differences across the websites. So there's an overall KCS website, but then each school has its own website, and is there a way to maybe streamline those or create some commonalities across those, improve some of the functionality around Parent Square, and more consistent communication across different schools. Okay. On the staff side, and around one of the primary priorities, excellence in foundational skills. Much like with the parents, we heard from staff, there's too much testing, perception that there's too much testing. Again, on the personnel side, retaining and attracting high-quality educators, increasing support staff. Also, questions around the organizational hierarchy. Excuse me. Communication side, we heard from staff that, are educators as involved as they could be in some decision-making processes, and if there are opportunities for more involvement, that would be appreciated. On the doing my job side, again, things that you've already seen in those survey results, folks feeling overworked, feeling like they don't have enough time necessarily to do the things that they need to do. And on the infrastructure side, again, current and future needs as your community grows and probably will continue to grow. And then on the community side, just ensuring that the skills that students are leaving with are preparing them for the future. Community members also reflected that the organization might be a little top-heavy, increased communication with public entities, and better engagement with the community around 865 academies. And so there wasn't really anything new in the focus groups that wasn't in the survey results. It sort of reified a lot of what we saw in those closed-ended data, but that's important too. And so what I think our takeaway here is what we see, if we really try to boil this down into some very specific points. Your priorities are clearly seen as important. The 4 that you're working towards right now, you saw those numbers. There's a lot of uniformity around that. Communication is viewed as a positive, right? It could be improved in some ways, but overall there's a perception that communication is a net positive. And your overall culture is viewed as positive. The overall culture of your schools is positive. I think the places for opportunities, the performance associated with those priorities is a place where I think we see some places that could be improved. On the staff side, I think there are opportunities in terms of the question of workloads and things of that type. Are there ways to engage and make that more attractive for folks and allow them to do their jobs more successfully? And then the success for every student dimension was one that routinely was coming in sort of on the lower side. And so of the 4 priorities, that would be one, I think, in particular, if there's a place to devote energies and resources that, from the data at least, would suggest that that would be well spent. And I think that's it. Yes. So I know that's a lot. I know it's a lot to digest. There's a lot of data, and I will say you all should be committed. There's a lot of information here that can be useful as you're building this. Again, some of it's positive. Some of it are places where I think you can grow, and that's important.
Yeah. No, I think it's good to hear, the strengths and opportunities. And I appreciate you coming and kind of giving us that 30,000-foot view, so then we can dive into this and all the data. Mr. Triplett.
A question about were the focus groups primarily ask questions about concerns? As you look through the list, you don't find anything in here that says, hey, we're doing this well. And if we are looking at our strategic plan, the things we are doing well, we want to continue to do well. But nothing in the focus group results really, frankly, right, nothing's positive in that. I mean, this is an area we need to improve, which is fine. We do need to know where we need to improve. But was there any conversation about what we're doing well?
Yeah, I mean, so the focus groups really were targeted towards certain questions. We tried to start with certain questions, but the nature of those is we do want them to be somewhat organic and for them to grow. There are certainly positive comments, and you'll see in the full report, there are positive comments in there. It's just when you look at it from a proportional standpoint, they tend to be more these are places where we see there could be improvement, as opposed to, hey, these are the things that are, I mean, I know there are things that I could cherry pick certain ones for you, but that wouldn't be fair to just cherry pick certain comments. But no, there are some in there, and when you look through the full report where you have a listing of all of those comments, you'll see that there's some positives. And those dovetail with the things we saw in the surveys.
Okay.
Right, again, I think there's a belief that the directions you're going in, and when I say that by priority importance, that's pretty consistent. And that came out in those focus groups. We're hearing that, yep, you're pulling in the right direction. Folks seem to be, you know, they're rallying behind that. The question is, are there ways to improve on that? So yes, I think that's a good question. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Corey, do you mind kind of speaking on next steps, the next phase of this work,
Yeah, absolutely.
and what that's going to look like?
So I will say thank you so much for the just breadth of work that was done. This was a very comprehensive process, as you all can see, just based on the weight of the packet that's in front of you. And so something that's worth keeping in mind is that there is a lot of context here. What there is not in front of you right now are just various data points on the current status of the organization. So I know Ron shared that kind of at the beginning, that this is perception data. We also need to look at some of our achievement data and some other numbers as well. And so as Milan closes out this phase of the process, we will be beginning the, I would say, strategic planning, the core strategic planning phase of this work with Accenture. They'll be taking data from a variety of sources, working with staff to contextualize these findings, and kind of boiling all of that down into a set of ambitious but achievable goals for us to work toward. And so you heard from Ron that we've got some positive things that we'd like to sustain and continue to build on. We also have some opportunities. The work over the next couple of months will be identifying how much of these are, communication gaps, and is this a communication solution that we need to be looking at? Versus how much of this is, real and tactical work that we need to also embody in a specific way in the strategic plan. And so that's kind of the nitty-gritty next steps that we'll be working on with our next vendor, who has already come on board and started working with us.
Awesome. Thank you for that recap and kind of what we're expecting in the next phase of this work. And thank you for being here and sharing all this data. I know it was a heavy lift, but we appreciate you guys coming and doing that work for us, and looking forward to next steps in our strategic plan.
Well, thank you all very much, and wish you all the best with your planning process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving on in our agenda, Ms. Coatney, we'll start our voting meeting now.
Thank you, Madam
Or
Chair.
the voting portion of our meeting, I should say.
Item 6, consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Triplett, second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7A, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-171, interscholastic athletics as amended.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7B, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J-110, equal educational opportunities as amended.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Pike, a second by Mr. Triplett. And I believe before we have discussion, we do have some public forum speakers on this.
We do. We have one. So Alexis Rhodes. Alexis, if you'll state your name and county of residence, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Alexis, and I live in Knox County. My son has an IEP, and some of you also have some students with IEPs, is my understanding. And some of us know that in order to have an IEP and receive that specialized instruction, the student must first be found eligible for those services, and that eligibility is based on one of at least 13 categories. Now, I won't go into all of them, it'll take too long, but my son's, for example, is under autism. There are multiple others. These disabilities are categorized, to simply put it, it's necessary to identify common struggles and resulting needs amongst the populations to allocate necessary resources. Even still, the IEP eligibility evaluation process is complex and at times mismanaged. However, imagine if that list of 13 categories was replaced with on any basis. Not only would that further mismanage the process of identifying the unique needs of these students, it would inundate the system entirely. These categories are designed and necessary to target specific groups and the struggles that they often share. Removing the language that ensures protection of federal civil rights within these policies would leave people in these groups without objective standards for which that they are maintained. These words within these policies are not frivolous and are necessary to identify the specific needs of these marginalized groups. Aside from illegal consequences and systemic inequities that would result from the removal of this language, it sends a clear message to your students and families that they are not worthy of identifying or supporting. My son is different, and that's okay. It's absolutely okay to understand that he is different. Different is okay. He's still a kid that loves recess the most at school. And he loves Minecraft, but he can also name nearly every species of flower and can hear a toaster from 6 rooms away. It's kind of crazy. He's different, and different is all around you, but different is not less. And just because somebody is different doesn't mean that they shouldn't have equitable access. Different needs to be identified so we can understand and safeguard their unique needs. Just as Reverend Butler stated on Monday, it is your actions that will ultimately maintain these standards. However, words still matter. And the language to vote on tonight will define those standards. Without objective language, how are we to trust that those actions will align with our students' unique needs? Will your actions tonight further their struggles, or will you act to ensure that they are seen and heard and supported? The follow-through may not always be perfect, but you can at the very least lay a foundation to maintain the language that safeguards these standards that you claim to have for them. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public forum.
I know we have some discussion on this item. Ms. Bike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the first thing I'll ask, I saw that we have a second option that was shared with us this afternoon or last night or somewhere between Monday's meeting and now. And I had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Dupler earlier today, and I was wondering if my first question could be to ask him to maybe speak to the option B.
Like the alternative language? Yeah, Mr. Dupler.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Pike. Thank you, Madam Chair. As we discussed, after the discussion on Monday night and after the discussion that's kind of been ongoing through policy review and these other meetings, I went back to look at it and say, hey, can some other language be put in there? And as I mentioned on Monday night, a lot of these other policies in surrounding counties have more general language. They're not just referring to students. So on this policy in particular, I have recommended an alternative to restore the language that was in there, but make it more of a general statement, because these categories do still exist, but by making it general, we're not saying that this applies just to students. I mean, which it does, but it also applies to employees, student enrollment specifically, and it also applies to contracts with the school system. So that was the reason for that change. And then on some of the other, on the other two, some language was added in there that came from the legislature when they were explaining their change in the law. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then, I guess, secondly, to kind of speak to this, and like one of my stances on why I'm like somewhat dying on this hill is, and to be a little bit vulnerable, and I guess also to kind of ping off of our public forum speaker, is I have an autism diagnosis and I have an OCD diagnosis, and those are things that I have struggled with for nearly 42 years. And I have heard the gamut of things of, you don't look like you have this, you don't look like you struggle with this, just, all of the things. And, what can naming something actually do? Naming something for me has done a lot. And knowing that it is protected and that someone is going to protect it and a body is going to protect this is very important to me. And for our students, I went through school without that diagnosis and I struggled a lot. And I didn't feel protected. I always felt othered. And that's not what I want for our students, for our 60,000 students, and however many students who are either have a diagnosis or are not yet diagnosed, or it will take until they are an adult to realize that these are things that they struggle with. So out of inclusion, I would really love for option B to be considered tonight. I think it's really important to name things, and that's kind of where I'm coming from this. And so I really do, I appreciate Mr. Dupler's work in coming up with this option. And I think that this is a great compromise. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak into, we had a public forum speaker, and I have heard from several special ed families this week on this policy work. And, we have a policy, too, that currently lists out, has an extensive list. And I also just want to speak to the fact that whether you have listed out or not listed out, we have to make sure that we are acting on these things as well. Students should not be harassed. And on another note, we did unanimously pass this resolution to be a model district for special ed a year and a half ago. So a year and a half ago, we all came together and passed that. And, there's been some frustration from the community. I've been frustrated. I don't think that we've seen a lot of change in the past year and a half. And I just want to make sure, whatever we do, I want to see real change, and I want to see real action in this work. And I would love to, Dr. Brown, I would love to see an update in January on where we are in that work, but also what are some real changes that we're going to see, and what is that going to look like going forward. So I just wanted to speak into that while we're talking about the wording of these policies, I also wanted to talk about the action that we really need to see going forward. Ms. Templeton?
First, thank you for that. I wholeheartedly agree that actions are bigger than words and are incredibly important. In front of you, I'm new, so I didn't know I could send this out ahead of time, so I apologize that you did not get it ahead of time, but I did want to offer a friendly amendment as well. And my reasons are all of those that I stated on Monday. The legislature did not tell us to do this, and all of the issues that I have with the terminology. But I feel like this is a situation that we can compromise on. We all want the best for our kids, and I feel like sometimes we can get hung up in semantics, so I feel like we can have all of the words in there together and work together. And also to echo Reverend Butler on Monday, not take away the words out of the policies, but to add to the words to better serve our student body. So you can look at, I guess we're talking about J110. So that is actually on page 4. And you can see what I did was include everything in red at the top. That came from Mr. Dupler's section. And I also took out based on discrimination because it was redundant, and I agree with that. And then all I did was change the because of to on any basis. And I did add including but not limited to, because I feel like that's an important piece of it. And then that last line, students may report anonymously, or anonymous reports will be investigated with the same level of urgency as other reports. That was added by Mr. Dupler last time. So I'm happy to go through all three of these, but essentially all I did was take out for any reason and put in on any basis, and I kept the same language across the board. So they're all, it is exactly as it has been for years, and it is not broken. So I feel like making that quick change is a solid compromise. So I would like to submit a motion, substitute motion. What else? Right.
Second.
What is the substitute?
The substitute motion is to consider these changes instead. This friendly amendment.
Second.
You made a substitute motion,
I did,
and Patricia has seconded
yes.
the substitute motion.
So when this item started, Ms. Bott made a motion. Did you mean to make a motion to approve this policy or to, just for discussion?
If it's to approve the policy, is it the original or the Part B?
Yeah, since you made the original motion.
Yeah, I just need to know what the motion is.
I guess in mind, what would be option B?
I think we need an A, a B, and a C, right? We have one that's on second reading now, and then we have one offered by Mr. Dupler yesterday. And that's option B. And then mine would be C.
Yours
'cause
would be
it's
C,
the-
yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
It's the most recent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Ms. Bott made the original motion to approve option B, and Mr. Triplett, you seconded that motion. Did you mean to second that motion?
Sorry.
Can we just one more time hear the clarity of that?
So we made the motion and approved and seconded for option B. She is asking for a substitute motion
I am,
to move to C, not B.
correct,
Is that correct?
correct.
And that has been seconded. So we
Correct.
will need to vote, and we can continue discussing, but we will need to vote on your substitute motion. If it fails, if it passes, we're good. If it fails,
Right.
we go
We
back
go
to B.
back to the original, which is option B.
Great.
For clarity, what's the
Yes.
difference between option B and this one?
That's what I would like, just clarity on B and C.
The difference is the only thing that I changed, where I kept all the language the same, all the rights were enumerated, and then, but changed on any basis for any reason. So instead of saying for any reason, we put any basis. So it would say
What
on
line
any
is that
basis,
on?
I'm sorry,
What line is that on? Sorry. 11?
are we talking about 110? That's what we're on, right? Okay.
Yeah, 110.
Okay, so it is on third paragraph. On any basis, including but not limited to. So I took out because of race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, or disabilities. The rest of it is the same as Mr. Dupler's. So I'm keeping the original language and changing for on any basis, making that what the legislature changed, that's what I changed. Does that make sense? If you're looking at this. What?
Did you look
Okay,
like you wanted to say
question.
something?
So you're saying that on policy J110,
Correct.
line 12, on your version that I'm looking at here, it says, but not, sorry, on any basis including, but not limited to, race, color. You have race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, or disabilities listed.
That exists in the current
Yes,
policy.
okay.
What is black exists currently. So I
Okay.
went back to the original policy
Gotcha.
as it stands, and I made adjustments off of the original policy. So
Perfect, I
what is
understand.
changing, we're keeping what is there, but adding in the legislative language,
Okay.
which is on any basis. And to make it make sense, I did include, including but not limited to.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. hold on, there's a lot of lights on, so I'm trying to, Ms. Fontenot Ridley, I believe you were next.
Thank you. It's like Christmas in here. I appreciate, Ms. Templeton, your motion to substitute. We're, as a board, and everybody knows, we're elected to protect and advance our students and staff. As a board, we're responsible for doing everything we can in our power to carry out what we are charged to do. Sorry, I just wrote this down a minute ago. The language being taken out of our bullying and harassment policies causes concern among families whose children identify with these groups. Compromising by combining the language, as Ms. Simpleton did, seems to be a way to come together and show the students and staff that we care about the protections we're sworn to uphold. So we've kind of run around and come back to almost the same policy we started with that we were editing, I guess, or changing. And so we've kind of come full circle with a little bit of different language. So I just wanted to say I appreciate the work that everybody's put in to what it's come to.
Ms. Spike.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Dupler. I guess if looking at option B and lines 11 and 12, I think those are the big differences here. Legally, how do you feel these two differ in the having on any basis, including but not limited to, versus the against on any basis, but having the other up top?
Thank you, Ms. Pike. Thank you, Madam Chair. So our office's recommendation is option B. If this board wants to go with option C, this board has every right to do so. This board's the policy-making body. We simply wouldn't sign off on it. Again, it's not a change in the law that we have any control of. I hear that people don't like the change in the law, want to have things listed out, but the legislature made that change, and again, that's why our office has proposed option B to try and capture as much of the list as possible. So that's where we are, and if you look at the legislature's move, they want it on any basis. That's what they want. Mm-hmm. So.
Thank you. I appreciate your office's work on this.
Ms. Morgan.
Okay, I'm a little confused. I mean, I'm feeling better now, but because I'm sitting here and I have the original revision, I have the original policy, I have the first revision, I have option B, and I have Ms. Templeton's, and I'm a visual person, so it's helpful to have these here. So just to clarify for those who are in attendance and those watching the meeting who may not have all versions of the policy in front of them, the proposed policies in front of them, what Ms. Fontenot Ridley said, that we have kind of done a runaround here with the language, is how I see it as well. And there are a couple different versions here. The way that I see it, option B, as Mr. Dupler has proposed since our meeting Monday, and as he just stated is the law office's recommendation, does add back in some of the language that was removed in that first line. So I appreciate that Mr. Dupler took what we heard Monday. I know Dr. Butler said some things that were very impactful, and Dr. Butler, I appreciate you sharing, and I want you to know that I heard what you said, and the same for our public forum speakers who shared, as well as some emails that were received. And while I would never assume to know what it's like to be in somebody else's position that's in one of these groups, I can certainly listen to people and know what it's like from my perspective myself and with my children. But I hear what people are saying, and I never want anyone to feel unseen or unheard in Knox County schools. I don't think that's the heart of anybody on this board. And so I appreciate that Mr. Dupler has presented us with an option that does put back in some of that language, which was what we were hearing from people was problematic in the version that we have discussed at policy review twice, and in meetings before. So because this version does have language put back into it, and is the recommendation of the law office, and in light of seeing that we do compromise, because that is important, and most importantly, making sure people do feel seen and heard, I will vote for option B to go with Mr. Dupler's recommendation from the law office.
Mr. Triplett, you haven't had an opportunity. I'm going to let you go ahead and speak.
Yeah. I don't know that the language on any basis or adding that in, I know it doesn't ultimately change how we do this in practice, but I would be acceptable to option B as well. Would you be willing to pull that substitute motion and just stick with option B?
Truthfully, no. I think it's important to name. We've heard I've gotten numerous emails, and so on behalf of the constituents that have emailed me a lot over the last 4 days, I think it's important to consider it as a...
Even though it's named above in lines?
Up above, it's talking about the opportunities that are available to students, making sure that there are equal opportunities for programs and activities, regardless of race, color, and creed. It takes out down below the discrimination and who's being discriminated against. Does that make sense? So it's listed at the top to promote opportunities with regard to programs and activities, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, or disabilities. But that is not directly speaking to discrimination.
Mr. Dupler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The language up top refers to both, Ms. Templeton,
Okay.
discrimination or harassment, and promotes equal opportunities. So it's referring to all those things. Yeah.
Ms. Fontenot-Ridley.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I agree with Ms. Templeton. There are policies, and of course I've read all of them because I was a teacher thoroughly. But there are all kinds of policies that have language in there that is not necessarily in the actual law. And the law actually doesn't say to delete it, the bills do. And from what I understand, we go by what the law says and not necessarily what the bills say, because the bills go from where they started to where they were voted on and passed. So I don't see any reason why we should not keep in the language of the protected groups, since it is not in the law that we have to take it out. And I think it benefits people to see it in the policy. Because if I'm looking at it as a parent who I feel my child has been discriminated against, I want to know that it's there and that it's agreed that that's important. I mean, it doesn't mean that we're not going to follow it if we take it out, but I think the visual of it is important. And I think a lot of families feel the same way from the emails that I'm sure were sent to me too.
Do you want to respond back, and then I'm going to go to Ms. Christie?
I do. Mr. Dupler, am I reading it wrong? Because I am open to conversation for sure. And you and I have talked quite a bit, and I appreciate your time and willingness to do that. So when it says up at the top, what you have rewritten, in general, I'm going to just read it out loud because that's how I learned. In general, the Knox County Board of Education, Knox County Schools, prohibits any form of discrimination or harassment and promotes equal opportunities with regard to programs and activities, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, or disabilities. This is the paragraph that we are discussing right now. So when it is listing it out, the way, and it might be all the cross-outs and the underlines and the colors, the way it's reading to me is that we're promoting equal opportunities for all of these groups. But down, is that second line referring to the discrimination and the harassment as well? Is the short question.
Ms. Templeton, yes.
Okay, all right.
Legally. I mean, and that's pretty common legal language that
Okay.
applies to everything.
Right, and I am not an attorney, and that's why I'm leaning on you for clarification. Okay, in this case, on this one, which we're not discussing the others, so I'm happy to, I will have alternate motions for the other two because they are not listed in the other two additions. I am comfortable with Plan B for this one, based on what you just said.
So are you withdrawing your substitute motion?
I am withdrawing my substitute motion for J110.
Ms. Christie?
I just have, whether it's option B or C, a question about just how the policy starts. I mean, the words "in general" kind of strikes me a little bit as a very odd way to start a policy on harassment. And I mean,
Like in some circumstances, it's okay, and in some
I mean, it
it's
just
not.
seems
It
odd
would
to me to
never
start
be
a
okay.
policy with "in general." I
Yeah.
don't know if Ms. Templeton or Mr. Dupler, either of you want to speak to that. I mean, is there a reason that those two words are there rather than just starting with the Knox County Board of Education? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I want to start strong that we do not allow or put up with any harassment. Mr. Dupler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Christie. I mean, again, I go back to the comments on Monday night. The legislature, when talking about educators and students, has directed to remove the language. But when you look at other districts still have some permutation of the language, and that's the other thing. This language, some of the policies that we looked at on Monday night have 4 of the categories or 5 of the categories, and don't have all the categories that are listed here. You've got some that apply to employees but don't apply to students, such as age or veteran status. So, so that's the reason for the words "in general," because these categories apply to all types of discrimination. So instead of just focusing on the students alone. So that was the reason for the language.
So is it problematic to remove that? I mean, and to start with the Knox County Board of Education?
Yes, it is problematic.
I mean, is it problematic legally to remove the "in general"?
I can't answer that. Have to ask the legislature.
Reverend Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not a lawyer either, but I've read enough policies to know that certain words carry certain meanings, but when you read them from a legal perspective, what I'm hearing is that we may not be able to put the categories that this will apply to, whether it may be teachers or whether it may be students or whoever. So when you say in general in this sense means it applies to everybody. So if you don't put in general, then it may not, you have to put it exactly what it applies to, and that's what you're trying to avoid. So in general means the opposite of what we might think in general. In general, I think everybody's good.
I think my concern is that people reading it might misinterpret the meaning of "in general."
And I don't disagree.
If that makes sense.
And I don't
That's
disagree
why I
with you
asked.
because I think when you said that, I thought, yeah, that is a strange way. But when you think about what the alternative is of making this policy work in general is the legal approach, what I'm hearing being said, that in general means it applies to everyone. That's my understanding. Is that the understanding? If you can say that.
I think you're right, Reverend Butler. Again, I mean, the point was because a lot of these other districts are doing this is, these things can apply to employees, to student enrollment, to contracts. I mean, just a wide variety of things. So saying, the intent is to say, whether you're talking about students or otherwise, this is Knox County Schools and the Board of Education's, policy. So.
Ms. Fontenot-Ridley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tend to agree with Ms. Christie. Generally speaking, but maybe not in all circumstances, I can see how it could be interpreted in that way. So I agree with that observation. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm thinking. Ms. Templeton.
I just have a very quick question. When, in this case, in general, is it intended to imply across the board? Is that how you would define that? Like, across the board, the Knox County Board of Education, I mean, obviously it's not the language we would use, but is that the intent of in general?
Mr. Dupler.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Templeton, yes, I mean, that's the intent. Again, that it doesn't apply just to students, that it applies across many categories.
Is there any more discussion? All right, well, we'll go ahead and vote on this. Why don't we do a roll call vote, Ms. Coatney?
Just to clarify, we're voting on option B.
Yes, for clarification, we are voting on option B, which is the alternative language that Mr. Dupler supplied to us earlier today or yesterday. Yes.
Dr. Butler?
Yes.
Ms. Templeton?
Yes.
Ms. Fontenot-Ridley?
Yes.
Ms. Bike?
Yes.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Triplett?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Motion carries. I know there's a lot of papers.
Item 7C, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J180, Rights and Responsibilities as amended.
Move to approve option B.
Thank you for that clarified motion. Clarified motion by Mr. Triplett, a second by Ms. Christie. Do we have any discussion? Ms. Templeton?
I'm back. Yes, I do, because this really is a cut and paste situation. So you can see the only change I made to the original is on any basis, including but not limited to, and everything else is the same. I feel like this is the truest form of compromise. Just using the language and in the law and the suggestion by our law department and adding that in. And I would like to make a motion. A substitute motion.
A substitute motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Substitute motion by Ms. Templeton, a second by Reverend Butler. Right, I guess we will discuss this. Mr. Triplett.
Mr. Duper, do you sign off on either one? I mean, on the second? Would you sign off on the third option, I guess?
Thank you, Mr. Triplett. I mean, our recommendation was option B, so that's our recommendation, so no. Yeah.
Reverend Butler.
So I see the difference between B and the substitute motion, which we can call C. And including but not limited to is the same. It's just, it says all applicable federal and state laws regarding protected classes, and then it gives the references. And what option C does is says what those classes are, particularly the federal classes. And what it does when you list it out, because those lists, unless I'm wrong, Mr. Dupler, is the applicable federal law. Is that correct?
Yes, in general.
Yeah, in general. So, and that's pretty good. So in general, and so what it does, it gives us an understanding so we don't have to go look them up. So we're going to list the reference anyway, and you don't list the whole federal law. You just list those classes. And since we have them listed in a previous one we just passed, why not list them here? And that way we have those categories identified. The reason why I think J110 worked was because you had them listed somewhere in the document that you didn't have to go and look for them. So I think when we say who's looking at them, well, everyone who looks at them can see these are those protective classes. You can even say, if you want to do a B plus C, all applicable federal, state laws regarding protective classes, which are, and then you list the protective classes. So that's the reason why I have seconded the motion, because I think those protective classes is being listed is an asset to the policy.
Thank you, Reverend Butler. Ms. Bike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Dupler. Can you explain any sort of reasoning? Like, I absolutely understand how on option B, lines 11 through 13 kind of seem to encompass or are encompassing, all of those named categories. But was there any reasoning to not include a in general sentence like what was incorporated in the previous one?
Thank you, Ms. Pike. Yeah, I think I understand your question. I mean, why not put the same in general phrase? And the answer to that is that there wasn't that type of language before. There was that type of language before in 110, so that's why it was put in. It was put back in with the in general language, and we added. And I thought we added. I know it's on 210. We added a cross reference to 110. So I would say that, on option B, I mean, the intent is to have a cross-reference to 110 for J180. So that's why. Yeah.
So there is a cross-reference.
There should be, and I'm not seeing it on this version, but yeah, there should be a cross-reference to J110, and then I need to look at 210. I think 210 has the cross-reference. I hope. Let me look real quick. Yeah. Yes. 210 has the cross-reference, but I mean that same cross-reference needs to be in J180.
Okay.
Yeah.
How would we handle that if we are voting tonight and the cross-reference is not there? Is that something that an amendment needs to be made?
The board's said in the past that, cross-references can be easily added, and, that's something we do as a matter of course, and I'm telling the board that it needs to be there and it will be added.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any more discussion? Ms. Morgan?
Mr. Dupler, I think we just want your suit to get plenty of screen time tonight. That's why you're the man of the hour. You got to highlight that. Yeah, turn those lights on, please.
Yeah, does this
It's
one
about
light
time
up?
to do that. I think the batteries can last the rest of this meeting. So, Mr. Dupler, can you please just thank you.
I don't know if I can take you seriously
That does
now,
help
but-
very much. My mood is lifted instantly.
Very festive.
Mr. Dupler, just for clarity, on this policy, can you reiterate why we are taking out the specific listing and replacing it with including but not limited to all applicable federal and state laws regarding protected classes?
Yeah, thank you, because I wanted clarification again on this as well.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Morgan. So again, if you look at the new state law that, is not universally liked, and it says on there to delete, the listing that we've been talking about, and it goes into even more of a laundry list than what you see in these policies. But it says delete this listing and substitute instead on any basis. So when coming up with this option B that you see tonight, I tried to look further into what the legislature was doing. And the legislature did have some additional notes about why they did what they did. And it talks about, in those additional notes, and it's a fiscal note on the bill, it talks about that their intent was to require an educator to follow all applicable federal and state laws and to not generally exclude, discriminate against, or unfairly treat students. So I saw on one hand where they were trying to take out the listing, but on the other hand, they're saying, hey, we do want school districts to continue to follow federal and state laws. So that was the reason why I added the language in there, because the legislature didn't say you could exclude that type of phrasing. So that's why I put it in there.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. So is it your recommendation from the law department then that to be in compliance with the state law, we need to take out that listing?
Yes, that's our recommendation, is that, based upon our reading of the new law, that would still include and let everybody know that the federal and state protections are all still there, but we're doing our best to comply with what the legislature has said.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate that addition of the federal and state laws.
Ms. Faulkner-Ridley?
Thank you, Mr. Dupler. So the document that you're referencing is the language in the bill that they say to get rid of the language?
Thank you, Ms. Faulkner-Ridley. So what you have is the law itself, which directed the delete and the substitute. That's in the actual law. What I was reading from was some additional language that was included in the notes with the bill, explaining the law. So, yeah.
So what I'm reading in the law right now, it says on number 10, B10, not on any basis unfairly exclude the student from participation in any program, deny benefits to the student or grant advantage to the student, but I don't see where it says to take that out. Where I see it is where it is listed in the bill, the House bill and the Senate bill.
So what happens is when a bill becomes a law, it becomes a public chapter, and it's signed by the governor on April the 23rd of 24, and in that public chapter it says that delete this particular section that you just cited is amended by deleting on the basis of race, color, creed, disability, sex, national origin, marital status, political or religious beliefs, family, social or cultural background, or sexual orientation, and substituting instead on any basis. So that's what the law says.
Am I looking at the right law? 49-5-1003.
Yes, 49.5-1003B10. If you have the latest version, you're looking at the version that has deleted all that language and substituted on any basis.
So it deleted it, didn't say to delete it. I'm just trying to get my mind wrapped around it.
Yes,
Okay.
the law deleted it.
It deleted it, okay. Thank you.
Ms. Templeton?
So I understand that the bill that was passed and the conversations around it were felt instructional in nature for us to do that. But I do think it is worth noting that the legislature did not eliminate this language throughout all of our laws. They did not carte blanche change to on any basis everywhere. And for that reason, I question if it is a requirement for our board to make that sweeping change. And I don't believe, and based on kind of our previous conversation and your statement on Monday, other boards aren't making this change, so they don't see it the same way. And I think that is worth a question of whether or not we need to do this at this time.
Ms. Fike?
Thank you. I have some clarifying question, a quick clarifying question on the law for Mr. Dupler. Is it meaning to delete and replace from the law or delete and replace from our policies?
Thank you, Ms. Pike. So that's a good question. The laws rarely direct boards to do something specific with policy. I mean, it happens, but it's rare. Normally what happens with the law is the legislature changes their law, which they've done here, and the policy is based upon their law.
Okay, so really, sorry, I am again trying to wrap my mind around all of this. So realistically, what they're saying is they are removing that from the law. The law previously had told us to have that in there, but they are just removing that. They're deleting and replacing in the law, but they're not guiding us to do that in policy. Is that what the legislature is saying?
Yes, I mean, rarely does the legislature say, "Hey, your policy has to say this." They change the law, and then the policy is based upon the law.
Okay, I see.
Ms. Morgan?
So I very respectfully am going to say this, Ms. Templeton, I do see your point about the other boards, and I know we looked at other boards' policies Monday night. I am really just interested in what this board is doing, and I'm not an attorney, and I cannot interpret the law like someone who's been to law school. So I am just going to follow the advice of our law department and vote for option B.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion? Okay. So clarification, we are now voting on Ms. Templeton's substitute motion, which is option C on this one. Can you please do a roll call vote, Ms. Coatney? I know. There's a lot going on tonight.
Dr. Butler?
No, I'm sorry, I'm voting for the, I am voting.
This
for
is
This is
option C.
option C.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
Ms. Templeton,
Yes.
Ms. Fontenot Ridley,
Yes.
Ms. Bike,
Yes.
Ms. Morgan,
No.
Mr. Triplett, Mr. Wright,
No.
Ms. Christie,
No.
Ms. Henderson.
No.
That's 4 yes votes and 5 no votes.
Motion fails. So we will now then go back to option B and discuss that. Ms. Christie, did you have, oh, okay, sorry. So we are now on option B, and we will vote on that. Do we have any more discussion on this? Seeing there is none, can you please do a roll call vote, Ms. Coveney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Butler,
Yes.
Ms. Templeton,
Yes.
Ms. Fontenot Ridley,
Yes.
Ms. Bike,
Yes.
Ms. Morgan,
Yes.
Mr. Triplett,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
Ms. Christie,
Yes.
Ms. Henderson.
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Motion carries.
Item 7D, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J210, harassment of students as amended.
Move to approve option B.
Motion made by Mr. Triplett, second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? Ms. Templeton?
I have a substitute motion. I do, and it's right in front of you. Yes, and you can see the changes that I made. I did keep, the only thing that I changed, that I personally changed, was swapped out for any reason with on any basis. The rest were the same as the original changes Mr. Duper made.
Okay, so substitute motion made by Ms. Templeton, a second by Ms. Bike. We will now discuss the substitute motion. So Ms. Templeton, you're saying the only change you made to this was changing from
Right.
for
so-
any reason to on any basis?
Car-
From the original.
From the original. I went back to the original.
Option A. Right.
Option A. No, actually, no. I went back to the one that is in existence right now.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, current.
Currently approved, most recently approved.
Okay, gotcha.
And swapped out for any reason for on any basis.
Okay.
The other red lines that you see on there were from Mr. Dupler's. Down below where it says students may report anonymously and all the things.
I'm going to pull the option B up real fast, sorry.
Yeah. He added the anonymous from, yeah, sorry. Can you see it? Where he changed investigated and treated on Monday. And then he had also made the change at the very last paragraph, any student or staff member. Yeah. So I kept those. And my reasons are the same. It's the compromise on language to have it all.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Bike, I was reading. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was also reading. Yeah, I think having the kind of newer understanding that the legislature's directive was to delete and replace their language, and that it wasn't necessarily a direct to us to change our language, is really what leads me to kind of stick with what we have. We are a very large school district that is very diverse, and so I think keeping these is important. Yeah, so I definitely will be voting in favor of option C. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing there's no discussion, we will vote on option C. Ms. Coatney, can you please do a roll call vote?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Butler,
So this is for the substitute motion?
Correct.
Yes.
Ms. Templeton,
Yes.
Ms. Fontenot Ridley,
Yes.
Ms. Bike,
Yes.
Ms. Morgan,
No.
Mr. Triplett,
No.
Mr. Wright,
No.
Ms. Christie, Ms. Henderson.
No.
That's 4 yes votes and 5 no votes.
Okay. Motion fails. So we will now go back to the original motion, which is option B. Do we have any discussion on that? Ms. Fontenot Ridley?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, no problem. Okay, seeing there is no discussion on that, we will vote. Ms. Coatney, can we please do roll call again?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Butler? Yes. Ms. Templeton?
I'm going to pass.
Ms. Fontenot Ridley?
No.
Ms. Bike?
Pass.
Ms. Morgan?
Yes.
Mr. Triplett?
Yes.
Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Christie? Ms. Henderson?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Ms. Templeton, would you like to change your pass vote? Ms. Bike? Okay, so that is 6 yes votes, 1 no vote, and 2 pass.
So motion carries. All right.
Item 7E, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-190, payroll as amended.
A motion by Reverend Butler, second by Ms. Christie. Do we have any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7F, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-200, expenses and reimbursements as amended.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7G, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-233, technology purchases as amended.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7H, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-241, internal school funds as amended.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Bike, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7I, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-280, fundraising activities as amended.
Second.
This one needs to be waived. This one needs to be approved on. We need to waive. It's the next one. It's the next one. Okay, sorry. That's the next one. Sorry about that. A motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
7J, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-341, uniform grading policy as amended.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? I apparently was one ahead, so thank you for, for that. Seeing there is no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8A, approve Tennessee Department of Education Secondary Transition Indicator 14 grant in the amount of $6,380.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8B, approve Knox County Retired Teachers Association grants in the total amount of $2,000 for Bell Morris Elementary School, Dogwood Elementary School, Green Magnet Academy, Halls High School, and Sarah Moore Green Magnet Academy.
Motion by Reverend Butler, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8C, approve Tennessee Environmental Education Association mini grant in the amount of $250 for Southdale Middle School.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Bike. Any discussion? Seeing there's none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
8D, approve Great Smoky Mountains National Park Education Program travel grant in the amount of $200 for Westview Elementary School.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Bike. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9A, approve contract with Baseline Sports Construction LLC for provision of tennis court services up to $200,000 annually for the term of January 1, 2025 through December 31, 2025, which may be extended for 4 additional years.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9B, approve contracts with East Tennessee Fence Company, Stanley Fencing and Landscaping Incorporated, and T.S. Wells Incorporated, doing business as Tim's Fencing, for provision of fencing services up to $2 million annually for the term of January 1, 2025 through December 31, 2025, which may be extended for 4 additional years.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Do we have any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
9C, approve amendment to contract with Accenture LLP for provision of strategic planning services.
Motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Reverend Butler. Do we have any discussion? Seeing there is none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 10A, approve Emerald Academy Charter School evaluation report.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Reverend Butler.
Yes, just wanted clarification on what we're doing here, because in January, we're going to have a report. We have to have approval as well, right? So what are we exactly doing with this? Are we just receiving this report as their actual report?
I'm glad you brought that up. Dr. Wilson, will you kind of explain what this does?
Sure. So what you're seeing on this board agenda is the annual performance review that follows the board's adopted framework for evaluation on the charter schools. You see that for Emerald this year, which we have seen for several years in a row. You don't see that yet for Knox Prep because they're in their first year. So you would see that coming into next year. You'll have an evaluation report for their annual performance. What's coming in January for Emerald Academy would be in relation to the renewal. So they're coming up, finishing their 10th year, going into their 10th year. So that's where we come back to renew our agreement with them to provide the charter service.
So in the past year, 2 years since I've been here, we've done this, but we didn't do what we're going to do in January.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to get that straight.
Yep.
Thank you.
No, I'm glad you brought that up for clarification. Yep. Ms. Spike.
Thank you. I guess more clarification on this. When we are passing it, is it just saying that, like, we're accepting this report, or is this saying, like, yes, something else? What are the implications on us passing this?
I think you're accepting the report. I probably would have to go back and look a little bit at the language on that myself. But that is, I think you're accepting the report that, again, the board has adopted a framework for evaluation, that process has been conducted, and that we're coming back to make a recommendation based on that framework that they're still in good standing, and we would recommend continuing on with that service.
Okay, so we accept this report, and then there's a point where, is that your team that would potentially make a recommendation?
So the renewal, again, the next item actually on the agenda is the charter school committee, the review team. We would use that committee on an annual basis for a full calendar year to handle any charter business. So that'll be a team involved in anything that comes up with the charter in the next year. And then we have an internal team, as we're looking at new applications renewal, that would be experts, our finance department, people like that would be involved in looking at those applications as well.
So if there are things that we want them to improve on, when is that recommendation made based on this report?
I'm going to be honest with you, Ms. Spike, I'd have to look a little deeper into that to get you the firm answer on that.
Okay. Would you mind to do that at some point?
I'd be happy to, and actually Ms. Nixon is not able to be here this evening. She would probably be able to answer in a much more detailed way, but I'd be happy to get that with her and bring it back to you. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any more discussion on this item? Okay. Seeing there is none, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10B, approve charter school application review team appointments.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Triplett. Do we have any discussion? Seeing there is none, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Triplett, I believe we have some public forum speakers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have public forum speakers. Justin Gentry. Is Justin Gentry here? We'll move on if he happens to be in another room. Stacy Reese. Stacy, state your name, county residence, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, friends. You've seen me here before. I'm Dr. Stacy Reese. I live in District 7 and I teach in District 4. On the KCS Growing Readers website, in the drop-down menu of the How We Grow Readers tab, there's a section on core beliefs that includes the following. Books belong in learners' hands. Readership is best grown when barriers to reading are removed. Any action that makes it easier for a reader to choose a book is an action that supports positive growth in readership. Additionally, the primary support section of this tab has these 4 points under the school library section. It's the largest selection of reading materials for all possible needs and interests, curated by trained experts, supported by educators with broad expertise in literature and inquiry skills, consistent experience for all schools and all students in school regardless of background. Once again, our state legislature has succeeded in making our profession more difficult by demonstrating a clear disregard for the expertise of educators and librarians, taking a stance that directly contradicts the values and beliefs upheld by KCS. While KCS policy recognizes and relies on professional expertise, our legislature seems intent on undermining it. The irony is not lost on me in that on this same page with all of these wonderful statements about reading, there's a tab called Titles to Remove. Again, let me reiterate, it's the legislature that's put us in this position. Furthermore, our harassment policy says KCS will not tolerate any harassment defined as conduct that unreasonably interferes with the student's work or educational opportunities. We know that removing books limits students' access to perspectives and experiences, which directly interferes with opportunity. And again, our legislature has put us in the precarious position of wondering if we're harassing our own students. Book bans overwhelmingly target books about racism, gender, and sexuality, many by Black, Indigenous, people of color, and LGBTQ authors. For students and staff who identify with the themes or characters in removed books, this removal can feel like a direct attack on their identities, sending a message that their experiences are not valid or worthy of discussion, possibly creating a hostile learning environment, which goes against the very principles of inclusive and equitable education that our schools should uphold. My first question is, how do we stay true to our core beliefs about reading when legislators have proven that they don't hold the same values as we do here at KCS? My next question is, how can we as a district support our students and staff who feel marginalized by this removal of books? And furthermore, how can we effectively communicate to our district's educators and librarians that we do truly value them as professionals in light of recent legislation that seems to say the opposite? I do not envy the position that you're in as you navigate the vagueness and the chaos of this language. I appreciate your willingness to do this, though, and your support of teachers, knowing that throughout history, no one who has banned books has ever been viewed favorably. Thank you again for our service to our schools, and as always, any of you are welcome in my classroom at any time. 109 West, come on in.
Thank you. William Rose. And if you'll state your name and county of residence, you will have 3 minutes.
William Rose, Knoxville. I'm here for my kids that can't talk. I've just heard that they've been trapping, or not trapping, but putting kids in little rooms, and this is making me starting to think. A school is turning into jails and just making that solitary confinement. I've wanted to know. Just hearing about this makes me feel a lot less wanting to go back into school and just want to stay homeschooled. I really feel bad for kids that have to be put in there. They really shouldn't need this. Stuff like this shouldn't happen. I really feel like this should be better, and they should treat kids more like human beings instead of people that have done bad things. I feel like people should really think, and teachers should think, and principals should think about what they're doing to students, especially students that have special needs and can't talk. They should really think before they do something. Especially if they don't like their surroundings. They shouldn't just be put in a little room like they're just being put in solitary confinement. This really shouldn't happen. And that's all I have.
Thank you, William. Jennifer Rose, if you'll state your name and county of residence as well, you'll have 3 minutes.
Jennifer Rose, Knox County. Good evening. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. While my family and I were having lunch today, I read the article by WVLT about the 8-year-old child being put into an isolation room at Carter Elementary. My 7-year-old son, William, who has ASD and other neurodevelopmental disabilities, made the remark, "What are they trying to turn schools into jails?" I replied that perhaps he should ask the board members of Knox County himself. So here we stand tonight. I'm thankful that the Board of Education voted to keep the policy allowing individuals to sign up before meetings. This story is heartbreaking and very concerning, and it's just one story. How many more are out there? How many other children are experiencing this? Why is this happening? Is it because these individuals can't verbally speak, so people can get away with it? In June of this year, my husband stated in an article that we fear the unknown. We fear what we don't know. This right here is why. As parents, we send our children to school trusting they are in good hands. Yet, here we are. While we understand that some outliers, such as school shootings, can't be controlled or predicted, the dangers our children face can be stopped and prevented. I'm not by any means suggesting that teachers or staff should be abused daily. What I'm saying is that there should be supports, documentation, and proactive measures taken before situations escalate to this point. It's December. School started in August. Why wasn't something done then to help the child? The article states that the school didn't have funding to provide the necessary services the child required. The lack of funding is not the child's fault. The school does have the funding if the supports needed are properly written into the IEP. If that is done correctly, the supports the child needs also support the teachers and staff. This benefits both. If the city can build new art statues, then we can fund the education needs of our students and teachers. Please don't rebut with the argument that it's two separate funding sources. We all know the school's budget must be approved by the county commission and comes from the county mayor. It's time to stop fighting against each other for political reasons of being red or blue and start working together to make purple. Start putting the children first. Start being purple. Thank you all. Have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Jennifer Owen. Jennifer, you'll state your name and county of residence. You'll have 3 minutes.
Jennifer Owen, Knox County. Asking good questions is one of the most important things you do, and that includes questioning repeatedly, even when you know the answers. Please don't rely just on the law director's office for information, because when they fully investigate, those are issues related to litigation. They may have no reason to even know of issues like individual staff complaints, and it's not their job to help you look for trouble. You must understand that you are the only one you can rely on to find good information. What I'm about to share is no longer deliberative between us, so you need to hear some things related to Ms. Bannister's tragedy that I was not allowed to tell you previously. At least 43 complaints were filed by staff members regarding one administrator, in addition to and separate from student and parent complaints. At least 20 of those were shared with their board member and then with me. Issues were reported to the superintendent at that time, as well as to the executive team members, including your current superintendent, who claims no knowledge. And the board was given a packet of some of those complaints. I want to be sure you each understand that none of those 43 staff complaints from at least 2 schools that I know of are recorded anywhere in KCS. Over and over, I asked how there could be no documentation of 43 staff complaints against one administrator. I got shrugs until my last day in office, when I was granted time to view files I knew would not be there. After evaluations, transfers, and other records, I asked again, how can 43 complaints just not be here? And I got a new answer. A formal complaint was never started. Please look at your policies. What your employees are told constitutes a complaint. 23 people compiled complaints and delivered them to supervisors exactly as required in your policy. Another 20 directly complained to 2 school board members who went to the superintendent exactly as required. Please ask how HR can cite an imaginary process that ignores your policy to hide at least 43 staff complaints, no telling how many more, 43 we know of, filed against one administrator. Please ask how a current superintendent, an executive team member at that time, could have no knowledge, or how HR and supervisors could fail to tell him any of this once he became superintendent. I also encourage you to ask how this board has put itself in a position to allow a superintendent to create a 6-figure salaried supervisory position with authority over all principals for a person who had at least 43 uninvestigated staff complaints against him. Please ask how, even in a deeply troubling culture of bullying behavior, there can be no records of 43 complaints and no accountability for any of the supervisors tasked with upholding your complaint policies, your harassment policies, and your bullying policies.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes public forum.
Thank you. With that, we are adjourned.